Thank you, Julie Bodie. That was unbelievable. Just amazing. That is actually all I have to say. I think we can all go home. That was cool. Unbelievable. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's so good to see everybody, whether you're here in our sanctuary in person or whether you're watching from the comfort and safety of your own home. We know that you are here by perfect divine appointment, here to bring something unique and wonderful to each one of us, and it is our great intent that you take something away that will enrich your life. Today is actually the 21st Sunday that we've been recording services for YouTube. Can you believe it? We started in mid-March. We were closed for 12 weeks, and during that time, all of our services were pre-recorded. Today marks the 11th week that we've been open and recording during Sunday mornings. Dennis Reese is our photographer today. Give him a hand, please, back there. Thank you. And something different today, we will be recording straight through. Those of you who have been in the sanctuary with us, I know you will miss all those pauses, right? And people who are watching from home, it may look a little different, so we just solicit your patience. We're really working on it. So, speaking of that, we are starting to create a temporary Sunday service videography team to share the load with Kathy Boyd, who has single-handedly taped, edited, and uploaded our services for over 20 weeks with no break. She's not here, but let's just keep her in our hearts and minds with a big thank you anyway, and thank her when you see her. So she's going to continue to be on the team, but it's just not fair to expect the same person to do it every single Sunday. So Kathy will chair our team. Mary Chiminella will serve as the board liaison. Thank you, Mary. Dennis and Patricia Reese will share in the videography for now, and we are looking for one or two other people who might want to join, volunteer to help with the taping and uploading our services. Kathy is preparing a job description, but what I know for now is you would simply need to have a computer that will accept a memory card. You need an internet connection and to be somewhat computer savvy. Kathy has the directions all written out, so it's not rocket science, but it takes some degree of computer finesse, I think. But training will be provided by both Kathy and Dennis Reese. And so if you could commit to just serving one Sunday a month as a videographer, then that will spread it out a little bit and give everybody a break. So prayerfully consider this. If this is speaking to your heart, and it might be something you'd like to do, just email Kathy Boyd and she will give you all the details and eventually send out her job description. So, I also want to thank all the ushers and greeters, as always, members of the Welcome Ministry, for your service today. You also have been working for 21 weeks, and we appreciate you greatly, helping us stay safe and 6 feet apart. Thank you all. And let's just remember not to be a little lax here, but to make every effort, to do every precaution we can to keep one another safe. So that means mask worn above your nose, unless you have some medical reason not to, staying 6 feet apart, and sadly, exiting the sanctuary immediately after service. The ushers will help you with that. Just a couple really brief announcements. One is that the youth ed team is still collecting school supplies, and One of the teachers sent me a note this week that so far, in addition to the many physical things you all have brought in, your monetary donations have enabled the teachers to purchase 50 composition notebooks, 30 packs of pencils, 20 pencil sharpeners, and 20 packs of erasers. So thank you for your generosity. Give yourselves a hand. And we got another week, so you can bring it again next week. That will make a lot of kids start the school year on an even ground. So those are really remarkable donations. One more thing, and that is we will be participating in World Day of Prayer on September 10th. That's an activity we can do because we won't have that many people in the sanctuary at once. So you can Google Unity World Day of Prayer 2020 from Unity and get all the information. Theirs will all be virtual. This year the theme is From Fear to Faith. They couldn't come up with a better theme, I don't think. Our sanctuary will be open from 8 a.m. till 7 p.m. You can come and pray. We'll have some prayed affirmations for you. You can meditate. On the hour, every hour, we will be doing the Silent Unity prayer service from Unity Village, and the chaplains will be on duty all day long to pray with you and to pray with your prayer requests. So if you didn't get the little form yet, it's on the table as you go out. Grab one, fill it out this week, and then return it to us next week. And more information on our website and Facebook page. And with all that said, I would like now to introduce today's prayer chaplain, Hope Dodson. Hope?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Hope Dodson, and today, together with Mary Tumanello, will be your prayer chaplains. So after service, we'll be at either side of the sanctuary in the corners for any prayer needs you have. And as always, all prayers are kept in strictest confidence. And I'd also like to add that if you would like to pray with one of us at the end of service, please just signal to the usher, and you stay seated until the auditorium's empty, and then you can come over and pray with us. So we always appreciate any prayers that you may share with us. All right, today's word is inner peace. I'll say the affirmation and then we'll repeat it. The peace of God fills my mind, my heart, and my life. Together, the peace of God fills my mind, my heart, and my life. Quiet moments in a fragrant garden, a stroll by a lake or stream, or a visit to any place of beauty inspires a deep awareness of peace. I also enjoy peace in the company of friends, those with whom I have easy camaraderie and deep bonds. Growing in spiritual awareness, I claim inner peace wherever I am. True inner peace comes from deep within me. If I'm feeling less than peaceful, I pause and breathe out worry, fear, and unhealthy concern. Giving my full attention to the divine presence within me, I breathe in a peace that soothes my emotions, calms my thoughts, and relaxes my body. As I continue to inhale peace and exhale concern, I move forward with a renewed clarity and confidence. And from Isaiah 26:3, those of steadfast mind you keep in peace because they trust in you. And now let's take a moment for prayer. We go to that quiet place within, that place of inner peace where that Christ of us lives in each one of us. We relax knowing that all is well in truth. Our nature is wholeness. And when we are in that inner peace, grace flows. Thank you, God, that this is so. Amen.
So we're going to begin today by saying how many of these common phrases you can complete. Are you ready? This is sort of like a fill in the blank. There is no such thing as a free lunch. Good. God helps those who help themselves. There is no gain without pain. It's too good to be true. See, he got exactly what he deserved. Yes, we reap what we sow. Wow, those phrases must be pretty common because most of you were able to complete every single one. In the relative world, those phrases seem to be true, and yet we would yearn for a different reality. From the great philosopher, one of my favorite all-time philosophers, Charles Schultz, Lucy says, "Sooner or later, Charlie Brown, there is one thing you're going to learn. You reap what you sow. You get out of life exactly what you put into it, no more and no less." Well, Snoopy ponders this for a moment and thinks, I'd kind of like to see a little more margin for error. Well, the good news is there is a margin for error, and it is called grace. Unity minister Eric Butterworth says, few words in the Christian theology are used more and understood less than the word grace. The term grace of God is engulfed in theological mystery, when really it is not all that mysterious. It's a simple explanation of the natural flow of the creative process. Grace is God's love in action. At some level, we do reap what we sow, especially in our own consciousness, yet God's desire to express through us and as us is so great that according to Butterworth, we never completely reap the harvest of error, and we always reap more than we sow. Good news, Snoopy. Good news for all of us. One of the dictionary definitions of grace is favor. Some siblings argue into adulthood about which one is the favorite child. Have you ever do that? My brother and I do that. However, the perfect divine energy that we call God has no favorites. Every single one of us is special because we are the activity of God in expression. Grace is constantly available to us all. We are all created in God's image and likeness, but in our human minds, we try to return the favor and create God in our image. We see the divine as judgmental and punitive. Anne Lamott reminds us, you can safely assume that you created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates the same people you do. I love that quote. God cannot hate, hold grudges, nor punish. God can only love. As Jesus tells us during the Sermon on the Mount, God gives God's best, the sun to warm and the rain to nourish everyone regardless, the bad and the good, the nice and the nasty. That's the translation from the Modern Bible, the Message. And what's so amazing about grace? Well, unlike lunch, grace is always free. We do nothing to earn it. We cannot buy or borrow it. We cannot bargain for or steal it. We are each dynamic expressions of God on the quest to express more of our divine essence. Now, we may create human barriers. We talked about those the last 2 weeks. We may create human barriers that limit our good, but we can always turn our pivotal soul to the divine grace of God's freely given love. Grace is our anchor in a storm, our harbor when our conditions seem threatening, our sanctuary of peace and joy. This is really important for us to remember right now as we're still engulfed in this pandemic, for in the harbor of grace, we receive above and beyond what we ask for, dream of, or seek. We might think of grace as divine love, life, order, and wisdom expressing around us, within us, and through us. All we have to do, one thing, we have to open our hearts and minds to receive. Our human bodies are biased on the side of health. The universe is biased on the side of abundance, and we are inherently biased on the side of love. It has been said the universe is rigged on our behalf. Grace is about those moments take our breath away. Falling in love, holding a newborn child, standing on a majestic mountain summit. Those things we call miracles, and instant healing, walking away from a horrible accident without a scratch, and joyously accepting the return of a lost child. Also, grace manifests in those everyday things that we tend to take for granted. A newborn puppy or kitten, the blessing of waking up in the morning, every breath we take. Just as the fish in my koi pond are swimming in the sea of grace, that it's water that Bob and I keep clean and pure for them, we are swimming in a sea of divine grace. We just need to open our spiritual eyes and see the goodness all around us. I still remember many years ago when I got my first set of contact lenses. I remember driving home, passing by a park that I had passed by countless times, and all of a sudden I noticed how bright green the trees were, how vivid the colors of the flowers were, and the intricate patterns of the sun filtering through the trees. Things that had been blurry were suddenly crystal clear. Grace manifests when we adjust our vision. God's flow is constant, and Butterworth says living in a state of divine grace means nothing more or nothing less than living in an awareness of grace. Now, sometimes our moments of grace might come in a flash, like Paul's did in his conversion on the road to Damascus, and we are blinded by the light. That's what happened to John Newton, who wrote the song Amazing Grace. Many of you know the story. Like many of us, Newton's path was a variety of twists and turns. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was 6. At age 11, he went to sea with his father, who was a commander of a merchant ship in the Mediterranean Sea. After his father's death, Newton served in the Royal Army, but found the ship's conditions so deplorable that he deserted, was eventually captured, and publicly flogged. He then became the servant of a slave trader who brutally abused him. In the late 1700s, he ended up the captain of a slave ship. And one night, a violent storm struck, and as the ship lurched and rocked, a fellow crew member who had been where Newton had then stood was swept overboard just a few seconds before. The crew struggled for hours in the raging storm, emptying water and expecting the ship to be capsized at any moment. Newton and another mate tied themselves to the ship's pump to keep from being washed overboard. And in that instant, Newton, who by the way could not swim, not a great trait for a sailor, is it? Anyway, he could not swim, but at that moment he recalled a Bible verse that his mother had taught him as a child about God's mercy. He sang out, cried out at the top of his lungs, "Lord, have mercy on us." Years later, he would write that his next thought was, how could the Lord possibly have mercy on a wretch like me? Yet, in that moment, he was filled with overpowering love and peace greater than anything he had ever known. And when the battered ship finally landed in Ireland, John Newton emerged with a new vision. He believed that God had sent him a profound message during that storm. And he went on to become an Anglican priest who spent the rest of his life working toward the abolition of slavery. The lyrics from Amazing Grace were a reflection of that moment when in the middle of absolute terror, he experienced the grace of God. Our realization of God's grace in our lives might not be quite that dramatic, but I know all of us can think of those times when the way through a stormy life challenge that we have struggled with forever suddenly becomes clearer, or when a door unexpectedly opens to something better than anything we have ever imagined. From those experiences, we emerge with new insight about God's amazing grace. There's a Bible story that highlights God's grace. In John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11, Jesus is teaching in the temple when the Pharisees bring a woman in who's been caught in adultery and force her to stand before the whole crowd in great humiliation. They say to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught committing adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" Well, to really understand what's going on here, we have to remember that the Hebrew Bible mostly taught that God is law. The Mosaic covenant was very clear. Obey God and you shall be rewarded. Disobey God and you will be punished. And Jewish law required that a woman caught in adultery be stoned to death. Not a pretty sight. The Pharisees then used this situation as a way to snare Jesus. The Romans, you see, did not allow the Jews to carry out death sentences, so if Jesus said to stone the woman, he would have been going against Roman law. If he said not to stone her, he would have been going against Jewish law. And at that point, it looks like Jesus is masterfully trapped. But he does something he doesn't do any other place in all the Gospels. It's really strange. He bends down and writes with his finger on the ground. When the Pharisees keep on questioning him, he straightens up and says to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first one to throw a stone at this woman." Well, suddenly, one by one, they go away. Left alone with the woman, Jesus stands and says to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She says, "No one, sir." And Jesus replies, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way and do not sin again." So Jesus' comments to the Pharisees disarm them. Since he speaks of throwing a stone, they cannot accuse him of violating Jewish law. And since he does not condemn the woman to execution, they cannot accuse him of breaking the Roman law. Now, Bible scholars have debated for centuries about what it might have been that Jesus wrote in the sand. Reverend Ed Tomlin says one interpretation is that he wrote in the dust the sins of the men around him, the accusers, reminders of why they were not perfect enough in their own choices to punish another for hers. It's also possible there that Jesus is referring to an Old Testament verse actually in Jeremiah that reads, "Those who turn away from you shall be written in the earth, for they have forsaken the Lord, the I Am, the fountain of living water." In other words, without the living water of our Christ's presence, the presence of our innate, infinitely loving oneness with God, we are no more than the dust from which our physical bodies came. So despite the fact that the woman had been guilty of adultery, despite the fact that there had been eyewitnesses, which was required according to the law, Jesus says to her, into what has been called one of the most important utterances of spiritual awareness in all Scripture, "Neither do I condemn you." He is operating from a greater perspective than law. He is operating from the unconditional love of God. Jesus is showing the woman divine grace. There is no penance, no punishment. Jesus simply tells her, "Go and sin no more." In other words, go and release error thinking and behavior and be the very best you can be. We don't know what happens after that. The story ends. But I have a feeling that the woman's life was transformed by the grace she felt that day. Her encounter with Jesus represents the power of the Christ mind to redirect our course, no matter what. Some of us, however, were taught that we had to earn God's grace by adhering to specific rules and engaging in sanctioned behaviors. The idea was we earned points from God by being good, and we lost points by disobeying the rules. That's what the Pharisees actually believed. Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore tells us that metaphysically, the Pharisees represent thoughts that bind us to external rules and rituals without understanding their meaning. Jesus referred to this as holding the letter but not the spirit of the law. The Pharisees, in their very strict, somber religion, had no understanding of divine love and grace. Jesus uses their attempt to trap him to demonstrate a principle greater than all their rules and rituals, the principle that pure divine energy does not condemn, but can only love, always. Like the Pharisees, we can turn away from the Christ of our being. For a myriad of reasons, we refuse to accept the gift of God's grace. Perhaps we don't believe in it or trust in it. Maybe we bought into that common belief that it's too good to be true. Or we're stuck in thinking that every error we make comes back to haunt us and punish us. Maybe we see ourselves as unworthy of God's pure, unequivocal love. Our experience with grace changes according to our consciousness. High consciousness heals and low consciousness weakens. Eric Butterworth says, something of the infinite is always flowing through, calling us higher. He says grace is like living in a house with every window and door tightly closed. There is still enough air leaking in to meet our oxygen needs. We always reap more than we sow. And in this story that we just looked at, Jesus was right there, ready to teach the Pharisees a new way of being, just as the Christ presence is always with and within us, waiting for expression. Through the grace of God, each one of us is called to be God's wholeness, peace, harmony, faith, strength, and wisdom on this earth. Grace is an upward, always upward pull of the universe, lifting us to the heights of our divine nature. Eric Butterworth first said that in the book, The Universe is Calling. The Jaffalas call this the cosmic view of grace. The creative force in the universe, the perfect energy we call God, has by its very nature, no choice other than to push toward better and better expressions of God's self. Each one of us is on this earth to bring divine ideas into expression. That's what the creative process really is. The Jaffalas say, to better understand grace, it might help to picture yourself rowing a boat, going downstream, going with the current. The flow of the stream moves you faster than the efforts of your rowing. Your movement is not simply the result of your rowing, but it's the result of your rowing in the right direction. Rowing against the flow is much more difficult. Some of us have tried that, and we agree that that's true, right? The flow of the creative process of the universe is always in motion. It's the river of God's grace that continually flows for our ever-unfolding good. We can resist it, we can fight it, we can flow with it, but we cannot ignore it, because it is part of us, and we are part of it. So God's amazing grace blesses, heals, prospers, and enriches us. And it is our mission not just to receive it, but to extend God's grace forward. Today, I invite all of us, whether you're in the sanctuary or listening online, I invite all of us to set the intention to do just that. Our divine nature is unconditional, endless love. That's who we are. Instead of being trapped in discord and division, we can rise above all human conflicts, lose the need to be right, and choose understanding and forgiveness instead. Especially in this time of social isolation, we can reach out via phone or email or whatever vehicle, Zoom, to share a kind, uplifting word with someone who may be alone and lonely. We can practice small but really important ways of being kind to one another, like genuinely thanking nurses, doctors, grocery store workers, mail carriers, who risk their lives for us every day. When I was checking out the grocery store yesterday, I just said to the young man who was checking out, "Thank you for being here. Thank you for being here." And he just stopped like he'd never been told that before and said, "Oh my goodness, you are so welcome." You know, it's amazing what just a few words can do. And we have to make sure also that our love is inclusive. Jesus told us, if you love only those who love you, what's the good of that? Everyone on this earth has intrinsic goodness and divine nature. Everyone deserves our love. And when we can accept, go with, and bring forward the flow of God's amazing grace, we can transform ourselves and change the world. Let's take a moment to repeat our statement about the divine that makes all this possible. Together, there is only one presence and one power in the universe and at work in my life. God, the good, omnipotent, and so it is.
Around us, as God's glory fills the place, I've touched the hem